Because I was asking in the previous video where we left off, did Hillary or one of her henchmen, the intermediaries, have anything to do with this operation? And this would include intermediaries like Obama, Lynch, Yates, certainly Brennan, or anyone else. I think that ultimately we are going to find that there is a connection, a Clinton connection in the origin of all of this, and I think that that will eventually we'll get evidence of that fact eventually. Excuse me. So the question is, when you look at all these people, Clinton, Obama, Rice, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Brennan, all these people on the other side of the pond, what did they know and when did they know it? These are the two most famous questions of every investigation. What did these people know and when did they know it? And that applies to Sessions and Rosenstein and Mueller as well. What did they know and when did they know it? These will be the questions that everyone will be trying to answer in the weeks to come, because I think we have pretty much all the players now on the board. Mr. Halper was kind of like that missing link that appears that we now have, that I suspected. You know, last time we were looking into the Papadopoulos thing, we never were able to resolve that. And I walked away from the last time we talked about the investigator, look deeper into Papadopoulos, and I walked away from that going, man, there's something going on here. Something stinks. Somebody planted, or Papadopoulos has got to be some kind of a plant. People trying to get him to go talk to Russians, to make meetings with Russians, to do all these things. Papadopoulos was never coming up with this stuff on his own. It was other people prompting him to do it. He would bring it up in meetings 2 times. Sessions shut him down in meetings and said, what are you talking about? No, we're not going to go meet with any Russians, and don't even bring it up again. We had him sending emails and Manafort getting wind of it and saying, tell this guy to quit sending me emails about this stuff, to go make some coffee or something. So clearly he was being blown off, but for whatever reason, these other people around him, mostly these London contacts, were constantly pushing Papadopoulos. They were not only wanting him to go have these meetings with Russians, they were enabling these people. They were contacting these people and clearing the way, setting up these situations for Papadopoulos to walk right into. He was correct in being skeptical about people like Mr. Downer's assistant, people like Mr. Clovis and others contacting him and trying to push him into engaging Russians all the time. It had to be something that certainly, and he even admitted to something that he was very skeptical of. And he smelled a rat himself. Papadopoulos was being used as kind of a patsy, the guy they could dirty up and use as a bad actor. And we know that Mueller's in on it, because who are the first 4 people he went after? All the people in the EC, who were all dirtied up by Mr. Halper. What are the ramifications? Well, if all that we're seeing is true, then the FISA warrants, the surveillance, the unmasking, the inside informants, unlawful searches of the NASA database, of the NSA database by private contractors, misleading the FISA court, lying to Congress, pumping lies and disinformation to the media, including classified information, the obstruction of investigations, the counter-intel operation itself, was all based on fraud. Many heads will roll. As I said yesterday, or and a year ago, and many times throughout my TowerGate videos, this is much, much bigger than Watergate. Many heads are going to roll. Either that or Trump is going down. He's going to be toast. One of these two outcomes. There's no happy medium here, folks. This is all or nothing. These stakes are very high. Did you remember that list I just read you of the crimes that were committed? There's a lot of people in a lot of trouble. And they only have one way of getting themselves out of that. And that is to take down Trump. To shut down these investigations. That's their only way out. It's all or nothing. They are not going to roll over. They are not going to at some point say, you got us. You guys got us, man. Damn, we almost had you, but you got us. I guess we'll all plead guilty and go to jail. Ain't going to happen. Not going to happen. The deep state is going to fight back even harder. And now that this story has come out and this genie is out of the bottle, you can expect things are going to get very, very turbulent. Tighten up those seatbelts, my friends. The turbulence we've been feeling is about to get much, much rougher. Because now the stakes have just been raised by a lot. By a lot. So, I have talked a lot in the past about Watergate. And that's why when Trump tweeted out from Trump Tower that his wires have been tapped, that I took it seriously. Because I lived through Watergate. I studied Watergate. I wrote a paper on Watergate in college. I studied this very, very intently and know a lot about Watergate. And there's a lot of similarities. And not just between Watergate, but in almost all big investigations, you have what we call flashpoints. Certain things that happened along the investigation that were points that were really bombshells, things you learned that really changed the nature of the investigation, or brought the investigation closer to completion, or brought the investigation to a point where you could have a much better picture of what crimes were actually committed and who may have committed them. So we have had a couple major flashpoints, and this is probably, obviously, one of the major flashpoints is we learned that the right Reverend Clinton had been the one who paid for the dossier. Something we all suspected, something a lot of people even said was true, but the Clinton campaign kept denying it. So after about a year, when they couldn't deny it anymore because Perkins Coie was forced by the court to release their records, that's what we learned, that Clinton had no choice at that point but to come out and admit that, yeah, we paid for the dossier. That was a big flashpoint. There have been others as we've moved through this. But another thing is there's a lot of people getting very impatient, and I keep saying be patient. And keep in mind, the Watergate fiasco took 2 years and 10 months, or 2 years and 2 months, really, for the whole thing to unravel. From the day that the break-in occurred, which was June the 17th of 1972 was when the break-in occurred. Nixon resigned 2 years and 2 months later on August 9th, 1974. There was several major turning points in the Watergate investigation. Really three there was many, probably dozens of small things that were being learned throughout the investigation, primarily by Woodward and Bernstein, the two reporters from the Washington Post. And there was really three what I would call flashpoints. The very first flashpoint was when they discovered that the money that was paid to the burglars was money that was paid directly out of the Nixon re-election campaign, the campaign to re-elect. What was called, it was like a slush fund that lots of cash money would come in, and these guys were paid in cash. When these burglars were caught, they had these cash monies on them. They were crisp $100 bills. All of them had $500, $600, $700, $800 of these crisp $100 bills. They were in series and therefore traceable, and they traced back to 2 or 3 different banking transactions, found them tracing back to the campaign to re-elect the president, what was called CREEP, the campaign to re-elect the president, C-R-E-E-P, CREEP. When they discovered that the money that was in the burglars' pockets came out of CREEP, that was a first major flashpoint, because it put the break-in at the Watergate Hotel, which was the Democratic National Committee headquarters, it put the break-in directly into the Oval Office of President Nixon. Another major flashpoint was when Alexander Butterfield disclosed in the Senate hearings, in the impeachment hearings or in the investigation hearings they had in the Senate, when he told them on June the 13th of 1973, basically almost exactly 1 year after the break-in occurred, he told them that Nixon had a secret taping system in the Oval Office. And when they learned that there was a secret taping system in the Oval Office, immediately, as soon as there was a special prosecutor appointed, he went after those tapes. Nixon refused to give them up. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the prosecutor. Nixon was forced to turn over the tapes, and then when Republican members of the Senate listened to those tapes and heard what they heard, they went into Nixon and said, "Oh my, you gotta go." And that was it. Another one of the major flashpoints in the Watergate fiasco was when Nixon fired the special prosecutor. Now, he couldn't fire him personally, so what Nixon did, and it was because this prosecutor was going after Nixon's tapes. Archibald Cox was the prosecutor. So Nixon went to his because Dick Cheney came to Nixon and they were having a conversation. Nixon saying, "Man, this special prosecutor is trying to get my tapes. I need to fire him. I need to get rid of him. I need to do something." And he said, "But it's against the law." At which point Cheney told Nixon, "Oh no, it's not. Not if you're the president. The president can't break the law. You are the law." So Nixon took Cheney's advice. Shouldn't have. So Nixon goes to his attorney general and says, "Hey, I want you to fire Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor." He says, "I can't do that." And Nixon goes, "Okay, well, you got to do it. I'm telling you to do it." He said, "Well, I'm not going to do it, and I'll just resign." So the attorney general resigned. So he went to the next guy, assistant attorney general, deputy attorney general. Nixon said, "Fire Cox." He said, "I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I'll resign first." And Nixon said, "See ya." Then he went to the third guy in line, Robert Bork, the solicitor general. Said, "Fire Cox." And Bork said, "Well, you are the president. You can order me to do that, but after I do it, I'm going to resign." Nixon said, "Fine, fire him." And see ya. That was called the Saturday Night Massacre, and that was a major flashpoint. So, we have these major flashpoints. Now, as I said, this is why you have to be patient. These things, the Watergate investigation went on for months and months and months, where Woodward and Bernstein had nothing. They were being stonewalled everywhere they went. No one would talk to them. No one would give them any information. They were being stonewalled, and if it was not for Deep Throat, their inside source, who turned out to be Mark Felt, the deputy FBI director, feeding them information and keeping them on the path and telling them which way to go. He told them, "Follow the money. Follow the money. You follow the money, you will find that will lead you to the truth." And they stayed on it, but they went through months and months and months, long periods where they got nothing. They were turning up nothing. They were getting a lot of abuse. They almost got fired. They almost got thrown off the paper. Other newspapers in town, the Times and other people, were criticizing them. The Nixon administration was criticizing them. They were taking tremendous amounts of abuse, just like Nunes, just like Mark Meadows, just like Mr. Gates, members of the Freedom Caucus, Mr. Jordan. They're all taking tons of abuse. But like Woodward and Bernstein, they're staying in the game. They're staying tough and are determined to get to the end of it, the bottom of it. And just as Woodward and Bernstein did, when they finally got to the bottom of it, the consequences were incredible. They forced the president to resign. Let's look at some of the fallout. There was about 22 people, I believe, that went to prison over Watergate. The president had to resign. The vice president, Spiro Agnew, he resigned due to a corruption scandal when he was the governor of Maryland. Essentially, Nixon threw his own VP under the bus to take the Watergate story off the front page. to put his vice president on the front page and his corruption scandals. Herbert Porter, who was Nixon's campaign aide, he pled guilty to perjury, went to jail. Nixon's top cabinet officials were indicted. They were called the Watergate Seven. That was Mr. Mitchell, Attorney General; Haldeman, Chief of Staff; Ehrlichman, White House lawyer; Coulson, an advisor; Strachan, Mardian, Parkinson, all senior legal advisors to Nixon. Dwight Chapin was convicted on lying to a grand jury. Ed Renicky, who was indicted on 3 perjury charges, and he wasn't even in Washington. He was the lieutenant governor of California. You had 2 attorney generals, Kleindienst. Also, you had a lot of people, high level, the highest level, inside the cabinet, go to jail. And that's exactly what is going to happen here, my friends. One of 2 things is going to happen. Either you're going to see Obama administration officials. Obama can't resign. He's not the president anymore. I don't know what you do to a former president. I don't know. Now he's a former president. He could literally be charged. Obama could literally be indicted. Oh, Biden was in on this as well. He could be indicted. Certainly the Right Reverend Clinton, if they find any connection at all that she was part of this operation, she would be indicted on this. Lynch, Comey, obviously. Brennan probably is the beginning source of all of this. It's probably Brennan who is behind having these contractors getting access to the NSA database to generate the raw intelligence. It was probably him working with the British government, GCHQ, and MI6 to get Mr. Halper going to begin that operation. So obviously Mr. Brennan and Mr. Clapper would obviously be looking at jail. Strzok and Page and all these other people, they were the second-tier people who were carrying out the orders of the higher-level people. They are mostly cutting deals. However, some of them did not. Some of them quit and have lawyered up. That would Baker, Rybicki, and those guys, and Comey and those guys. But it's very likely, although Comey is guilty of cover-ups and lies and various other things, it doesn't look like Comey was maybe part of the original plot, that he took over the plot. And how much he knew or how much he was kept in the dark is unclear at this point. He lies too much to tell. But one thing is for sure, he's certainly liable, and you have to wonder why he's participating in this cover-up or trying to play dumb. He knows a lot more than what he's saying, and the best advice for him will be at this point to come clean. I wonder how this story, learning about the fact that we now know that there was a plant inside the FBI, or the FBI planted someone inside the Trump campaign, I wonder how many people this is going to drive up out of the swamp. How many of these people are now going to come to Sessions or Rodenstein or Horowitz or whoever, are going to come to somebody and they're going to start trying to play and cooperate with the investigation in turn. Because a lot of people, this is going to bring a lot of swamp monsters up out of the swamp right here. Just learning about this. Because this tells them, uh-oh, this is a turning point. This is a major crime. This is a major problem. This is Nunes, and people are not going to let go of this. This thing is now going to go. It's going to take off. And a lot of people now are going to say, oh, it's this thing, man. It's no way. We're not going to be able to keep this quiet and cover it up. It's out. This thing's going to go very badly. And a lot of those people, this may drive a lot of those people to come forward and admit what role they played and that type of thing. So this is a major flashpoint. Regardless of how much of it turns out to be true, it's still not 100% confirmed, but it is certainly confirmed that it appears that they had a plant inside, the FBI had a plant inside the Trump campaign. It appears to be Mr. Halper. And the only question now is, that's going to be debated in the next couple of days and weeks, will be, was Mr. Halper brought in to work as an inside player for the FBI to find out if there was collusion going on between people in the Trump campaign and Russians, and if so, who? Or is this conversation going to eventually go to where I think it should go, to the real truth, which is that there was no investigation into Trump-Russia collusion at all, because the very people who would have been putting on that investigation knew that there was no Trump-Russia collusion because they created all of it, or their friends over at the CIA under Mr. Brennan and their buddies in British intelligence made the whole thing up. And that the operation was actually a frame-up operation that Mr. Halper he was running. Mr. Halper was running a frame-up operation for the CIA and British intelligence to take down Trump. That's what they were doing. It wasn't an investigation, I don't think, to find collaboration between Trump and Russia and that sort of thing. That was a cover story. And I believe that the whole thing was basically a frame-up, like I've said many times. Once the frame-up failed and Trump was elected, then they had no choice but to begin the cover-up. And they had to increase the pressure, and they really had to get rid of Trump, because if he sticks around too long and the Republicans are successful in holding on to both houses of the Congress, these investigations will continue, and eventually they'll get to the truth. The deep state has to stop the truth from being told, and they were doing pretty good up until about a couple of weeks ago. But now the tide's turned, the momentum has changed, and this flashpoint that we've just experienced is the second major flashpoint, I would say. And I think that this one is going to lead us to a lot more, learning a lot more. But this was a major piece of the puzzle. If it turns out to be true, it answers a lot of the questions, fills in a lot of the gaps, gives us a much better view of the big picture of what was really going on. I don't know how much longer they can keep this going, to be honest with you. And a story that was just covered yesterday that we couldn't even spend 10 minutes on because of this is the story that we just learned that Comey was communicating with, excuse me, Comey was communicating with the FBI. They were giving him instructions on what he should do before appearing in front of the Senate committee, including getting documents, having conversations with DOJ lawyers, and meeting with Mueller to get their story down and to get their timing together, which means that there was a collaborative effort between the special prosecutor and the former FBI director, who could very likely be involved or a target or a witness in any of these things. The very fact that this happened, and we now know it, Mueller should be resigning. He is completely compromised. And this information proves it. There's no longer any doubt that Mueller's heavily compromised with his situation. He finds himself in with Rodenstein and with Comey and with other players. I can't believe that they're not calling for Mueller to have to step down as a result of this. And I think there will be a lot more voices calling for that here in the next week or two. And maybe this week will be the end for Mueller. Should be. He should be gone. Just from what we learned, that he was collaborating with a potential witness or target of an investigation. And the fact that we know that Mueller knows everything. Mueller knows about the illegal FISA 702s that was going on via private contractors. He obviously knows about Mr. Halpern. He obviously knows about Steele. He knows who paid for the dossier. He knows how all this stuff went down. He knows it all. Mueller knows it all. He's completely compromised, and he has got to step down. This should be the end. This should be the end of the Mueller investigation. And once that's over, there should be a new special counsel called in, and we know what he should be investigating. The frame-up, the cover-up, and all that goes with it. So the tide is definitely turned, the momentum's on our side, but I'm telling you, the deep state, they are not going to roll over and play dead. Not going to roll over and play dead. But we've definitely exposed the soft underbelly, and now it's time to go in for the kill. In for the kill. That's what we'll be focusing on in the weeks to come. going in for the kill. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing a lot of questions in the comments section, because I know that when you discover things like this, you know, you discover another rabbit hole, and it opens up 1,000 more rabbit holes. You open a door, it opens up 100 more doors. This is exactly how it always works. You get a piece of the puzzle, a big piece of the puzzle, it fits in, but now, you know, you have a lot more questions as a result. The picture looks different, and now you have to ask different questions. So we're at a major turning point, and so appreciate y'all sticking with me through all this time. We're headed in the right track. The momentum's on our side. We're going to keep following the story day after day after day until the end, until we put these perps in prison, expose their crimes, restore the Constitution, restore the country, and allow the president to do his job. And he's doing a damn good job, by the way. So, thank you. We'll keep following the story. Appreciate you. You guys be good. Bye.